This video is sponsored by Valerion. Yep, after we told Disney not to countless times, they have gone and made another live-action remake. Well, as long as they keep doing it...
What are you doing? Teaching.
I'll keep teaching. Just like the last time, if the Snow White remake wins even 1 point against the original, we will give it a pass and allow it to walk away with some dignity. If not, then Disney should be really embarrassed. More than they already are. With that said, and the stakes set, let the battle commence. Now we all know the story for the original Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The Queen's jealousy motivates her to have Snow White killed by her guard, but he goes against her wishes and warns Snow White that the Queen wants her dead. She runs away, gets scared of the woods, and then stumbles upon the Seven Dwarfs' house where they all get along and become a family. And then we get the witch's disguise, the poison apple, the funeral, and then the prince comes in. And in true fairy tale style, they live happily ever after.
Weird.
Yeah, now going by the pitch that Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot gave us in these interviews...
She's not gonna be saved by the prince.
She's not gonna be saved by the prince, and she's not gonna be dreaming about true love.
We all thought that the remake was going to completely ignore the original story, with Snow White not dreaming about true love, not being saved by the prince, and of course, not meeting the Seven Dwarves, but these 7 stoners instead. And I can tell you, the movie was not reflective of this interview. Now that of course could be down to the reshoots because she does actually get saved by the prince, so if this interview is anything to go by, the film originally did not have the prince bring her back to life, even though it's one of the most iconic scenes of the original movie, but it's all in here. The Seven Dwarfs were also restored through reshoots and the movie's 1-year delay, so they thankfully made plenty of changes with the reshoot so the movie could much more closely resemble the original. But then the remake makes several other changes of its own. The story for the remake is that Snow White was born during a snowstorm, which inspired her parents, the king and queen, to call her Snow White. Yeah, that's their workaround for casting a brown actress as a white character. The jury's still out on how they try to justify Snape there. When Snow White is very little, however, the queen dies and the king marries again. Not long later...
He has a heart attack and dies.
Well, not quite. He is sent out to war and dies. Then the evil queen takes over the kingdom, and because she is threatened by Snow White's growing beauty, she reduces her to a maid. And the kingdom has no idea that she's really a maid, neither does the prince. Except in this version of the story, the prince is not a prince, he's a bandit. And also new to this version is that he has an encounter with the queen at the beginning of the movie, not just Snow White. So that's a good chunk of the new stuff. After that, we get the same story with the queen sending the huntsman to kill Snow White, only he can't do it. Now in the original movie, it was because she was showing such kindness by helping a baby bird who had been separated from its family. And in the remake, it's because she gave him an apple.
Apple? Apple yummy.
I am not making this up. And this apple really fought to have more screen time in this movie, as it makes a comeback. And just you wait until you get a load of that hilarious nonsense. So Snow White runs into the woods, which are alive for some reason in this version. In the animated movie, Snow White was imagining that the woods were alive, when really, the wind was blowing the branches at her, making it seem like she was being clawed at. In the remake, however, the woods are actually alive, and the branches are trying to grab her like a PG Evil Dead. And we never see the woods come alive again, so this change just felt pointless. You'd think the woods would come alive to fight off the soldiers or something later on, but no, nothing. So she finds the dwarves, and rather than become a family, she just leaves the next day. And this is where even more changes for the movie start coming in. First, we run into the magical creatures. Yeah, when this image ended up on the internet and caused a huge stir, we were told, oh no, they're just stand-ins. These are not the actual characters.
But as we both know, it would be an utter lie.
These are the characters that we get in the movie, and it is very telling that Disney decided not to include them in any of the film's marketing. We were also told that they are not meant to replace the Seven Dwarfs. But then why are there 7 of them? We also discover that the prince is the leader of this group, and this is the section of the film that is incredibly padded out. You see, the story for the original movie was simple and perfectly fit an hour and 20-minute runtime, but the remake wants to be under 2 hours, and that means tacking on about 30 minutes worth of extra story. So the movie rather cheaply shoots its entire second act in the middle of the woods. They bring the dwarves in, just to bring them in. It's clear they were never here originally, and we get multiple song numbers, attempts at character development, a celebration where they all dance and laugh despite knowing each other for 5 minutes. The romance between Snow White and the not prince develops and is the only useful extension here. But other than that, we keep wasting time until the apple scene, which usually signals the end of the story. But they have 30 minutes to pad out, so they are trying to delay that third act for as long as they can. And then we get an entirely different third act where Snow White gains the trust of the Queen's guards by stating their name and occupations.
What are your names and occupations?
And yeah, they side with Snow White, the Queen has a nonsensical death, and the town is happy again. So even though we had to make a lot of noise about it, and changes were made, Disney did restore a lot of stuff back to what the original story entailed. It just makes you think why they couldn't have made the movie like this from the get-go. Because the movie is not good, but this is far better than the original pitch. And ironically, I thought the love story played a much bigger part in the remake than it did in the original. In the animated movie, it was not a major factor at all. We get a bit of it at the beginning, a song about it in the middle, and a payoff at the end. But the romance was actually very prominent in the remake, and I actually thought the spark between Snow White and the not prince in this scene in particular was actually pretty decent. Certainly better than the romances in the other live-action remakes where I saw no spark at all. The only spark those characters had is that they were on top of the cast list. Now, even though Disney went back on many of their ridiculous changes, there are some pointless changes that stayed in. The one that confused me the most was the guard. The Queen tells him to kill Snow White and put her heart in this chest, and in the animated movie he puts a pig's heart in there, which is a smart way to cover for himself. But he didn't do that in the remake. Instead, he put a freaking apple in the chest. I don't know why they changed this, because all the Queen had to do was open the chest right in front of him and see that she was lied to. And there were many nonsensical changes like that. And when you finally get to the poisonous apple, you realize just how pointless all the new material was for this movie, because it took what was such a simple story and overcomplicated it. None of these additional subplots were necessary for the overall narrative, because we get to the same place in the story that we got to in the animated movie, except it just took longer to get here. And when the dwarves cry over Snow White's dead body, it's an iconic and sad scene in the original version. I mean, back in the day, it was unheard of to cry over the death of an animated character. Now we take it for granted, but back then, this was truly a magical experience. But in the live-action remake, it was completely devoid of any emotional impact. And it made one of the most iconic moments in Disney history feel small and insignificant. The same for when Snow White wakes up. If you had not seen the original, you would never have thought that this was a huge moment in cinematic history. In fact, you'd think I was as high as those hippies for even suggesting it was. But that just shows how far Disney have fallen since then. And the movie hints at a big climax, and then it doesn't happen. I mean, why show funny shots of the dwarves sneakily getting weapons ready to fight, but then just have them stand there doing nothing but posing with them? And this is especially embarrassing when you take into account how the original movie utilized them. So although the story is not as bad as it could have been, it still suffers from all the trademarks of these Disney remakes. It makes changes that never had to be made, they needlessly extend the runtime and overstuff the narrative, and the story was much less impactful than the shorter and simpler story that we got in the animated version. So the movie with the superior story is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Now before we continue, this is my bedroom wall. Quite boring, isn't it? But what if we transformed this boring little attic space into a home theater? And that's where this video's sponsor comes in, Valerion, who sent me their Vision Master Pro 2. Now when you get a projector, the first thing you want to do is test your favorite movies on it. So I tested Aquaman, The Dark Knight, and The Batman. And with Aquaman, dude, the first thing that stood out to me was how bright the projector was. It has 3000 lumens, which makes it really bright, but what also surprised me is that it produces great black levels. When you're watching Aquaman fight Ocean Master, there are a lot of colors on screen, and there are a lot of shadows and blacks mixed in as well. And this projector is able to handle all of them like a champ. Now, keep in mind, Aquaman is one of the most difficult movies for projectors to handle, because there is so much bright colors going on that a lot of projectors would get a little weird halo effect around some of the glowing objects, like these jellyfish right here. But that annoying glow is nowhere to be found on the Vision Master Pro 2. And what also really impressed me was how it handled the red flares in a HDR movie. Now, red flares seem to really throw projectors off the most in my testings, as the projectors seem to focus on the flares and completely ignore what's going on in the rest of the image. But the Vision Master Pro 2 performs incredibly well here too. The flares are able to maintain their brightness without blowing out everything else in the shot. Now to this day, I have never watched Aquaman on a normal TV. This is a movie so huge in scope that I can only watch it on a projector, and the Vision Master Pro 2 has just further convinced me of that. When you combine the great colors and contrast with the HDR10 Plus and Dolby Vision capabilities, it honestly gave me the best experience I have ever had of watching Aquaman on a home projector. Now, I've already told you that the Vision Master Pro 2 has the best black levels I've ever seen on a projector, but believe it or not, they only got better when I watched The Dark Knight. The darker scenes in this movie were so good, and it managed to maintain the constant black levels without crushing any of the details. And the Pro 2 is especially good at this because it has an exclusive feature called EBL, which stands for Enhanced Black Levels. So enabling this is very effective for any movie, but it's especially effective for movies that are almost entirely covered in darkness, such as The Dark Knight here, and that goes for plenty of other dark movies as well. And in The Dark Knight's case, it goes back and forth between IMAX too, and this projector is IMAX certified, meaning that it will natively play these IMAX films back as the director intended. And anytime the movies I was testing would switch to IMAX, I got really excited to see how well this projector handled it. And even Mission Impossible Fallout's IMAX sections where the aspect ratio would change to IMAX in real time was so good. Now, the Batman has even darker scenes than any of the previous movies I've tested, and this projector even handled that without breaking a sweat too. Every scene was absolutely stunning with the projector's dark contrast. So basically, I threw some of the most complicated movies at this thing and it handled them all pretty much perfectly. The projector also has dynamic tone mapping, and at first I thought it gave just a bit more brightness to the image, but the more I tested it, I found that it did more than that. It essentially takes some of the overly bright parts of an HDR image, such as these overexposed clouds, and levels them out, and in doing so, it actually brings out more detail in the overall picture. The same with these statues here. So essentially, when the HDR starts to oversaturate and blow out the image, the dynamic tone mapping comes in and puts it in its place. And that alone made me keep this setting enabled. So that's another great feature from the Vision Master Pro 2. Now, due to the size of the rooms in the UK, I can't position this projector that far away from my living room or my attic's wall, which is where I primarily use a projector. But this projector is able to account for that, as it has an optical zoom feature which allows you to zoom into the image without sacrificing any quality, and that allows you to get a really nice big screen from like 6 to 7 feet away. And this is not a feature that you normally get in long throw projectors like this one, but the fact that the Vision Master Pro 2 has that on as an additional bonus is an absolutely phenomenal feature that I think really sets this projector apart from most others on the market. And you can tweak the settings to ultimately get the picture to whatever your preferred preference is, and there are a crazy amount of settings they give you. And I gotta say, usually with projectors I have to make so many changes to their settings to get the image to how I want it. But with the Vision Master Pro 2, I changed the picture mode to dynamic, enabled enhanced black levels, bumped up the saturation, enabled a couple of other settings, and I am perfectly happy with it. And if that wasn't enough, the projector even supports 3D. So forget watching the live action remake of How to Train Your Dragon in theaters, get the Vision Master Pro 2 and watch the original How to Train Your Dragon in 3D in the comfort of your own home. And when you have a home theater setup like this, you should get a good sound system. And I personally use an LG Dolby Atmos soundbar, which is wirelessly connected to 2 rear speakers behind me. I also painted a piece of cardboard the same color as my wall to cover the plug socket to give it that more seamless look. And well, that's essentially how I transformed my attic into a home theater. Now there are many other little things you can do, such as painting the rest of the walls black, but I don't know if I want to go there yet. This is still a bedroom as well, and I'm not too sure if I fancy my walls being painted black. But even so, the Vision Master Pro 2 performs incredibly well without it. There is literally nothing this projector can't handle. Everything you throw at it, it does an amazing job. So a big thanks to Valerion for sponsoring this video, and if you're on the market for a projector, I can highly recommend this one. And I've included a link to their website and product page in the description below. Right, back to the video. Now let's discuss the elephant in the room. Rachel Zegler is not white. Now, I never took issue with Rachel Zegler's casting because of her skin color. I was just pointing out the hypocrisy of how Hollywood usually say, why can't these characters be played by people of color? It's not written that they have to be white. But in Snow White's case, it actually is. Hair as black as ebony, skin as white as snow. And then they're like,
I will not apologize for doing my job.
So Rachel Zegler as Snow White, how was she in this role? Well, let me tell you, she was actually pretty decent. No, seriously. I was expecting her to be terrible, especially after her disdainful comments about the original, but not only is she pretty decent, but she also throws in little touches and cadences from the animated Snow White.
At last. Goodbye, Grumpy.
No. Thank you all for showing me such kindness.
Now, wait a minute.
Even you, Grumpy.
She comes across as very calm and fair, and she even has a good singing voice, as Rachel Zegler can actually sing in real life. But she's not great. Something I noticed when watching the movie is that she is incredibly one note. She's confident and fair and has this calm demeanor, but that's where her emotional range ends. She never gets scared or breaks down crying like the original Snow White did. She doesn't get frightened when she meets the dwarves. She just doesn't really react and have any emotions outside of being calm. And that is a big difference between her and her animated counterpart. The animated Snow White was vulnerable and she was even more joyous, all of which contributed to her being a very likable and charming character. And as decent a job as Rachel Zegler does, her performance isn't very memorable and is definitely not going to become an iconic portrayal. So a good effort from Rachel Zegler, but in the end, the movie with the superior Snow White is the animated movie. Now we all know the Queen in the original movie and how evil she was. She's got all the riches in the world, controls the kingdom, and has everything she could ever want. Except for one thing. Her mirror telling her that she's not the fairest of them all. And the extreme lengths that she will take to acquire this one thing is insane. Although my question is, why didn't she just send another god to finish the job? One who is less conflicted and has no heart. That oversight aside, she is up there with the best of the Disney animated villains. And then we have Gal Gadot, an actress so talented that she was awarded the star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
It's not funny, Ed. Hey, shut up!
At the beginning of the movie, she was passable. Her performance is very dry and empty, but it wasn't breaking the movie yet. But then when the movie calls for her scenes to become tense and uneasy, she is so bad.
I'm your queen. It was Snow White who set the bandit free. She's plotting against me. Search the forest, find Snow White, and don't come back without her.
Anytime she had to raise her voice, even the slightest bit, her acting became laughable.
Are you against me too? Are you? Yes or no?
Fair than thee.
She just sounded so whiny. I don't ever remember the Queen in the original version being whiny. And anytime she is trying to be loud and theatrical or even threatening, Gal's acting completely falls apart. And her performance doesn't get any better when she starts singing. First of all, the singing is so abrupt and comes out of nowhere. And she goes from being more low-key to being crazy over the top in a millisecond. And there is no transition. And depending on what kind of person you are, her acting either becomes jaw-droppingly bad or breathtakingly hilarious. For me, it was both. Her old woman disguise was also really creepy in the original movie, but in the remake, it is so underwhelming. Think of all the fun they could have done with bringing this creepy old woman design into live action, but they just turned her into a regular old woman. No creepy design, no scary transformation, just a boring old lady. And this is what makes these live action remakes so frustrating to me. It's like in the live action Mulan when they skipped the iconic decision scene, or took the giant snake out of Aladdin and replaced it with a giant bird. Iconic scenes like these are the whole reason people tune into these live action remakes, to see what they would look like in live action. And for Disney to just gloss over them like this is just puzzling to me. The Queen also dies in this one, and I don't even know how. In the animated movie, she falls off a cliff. Simple. But in the remake, I don't think the movie even knows how she died. You can tell that they wrote themselves into a corner and didn't know how to get out. So yes, if you couldn't tell already, the movie with the far superior evil Queen is the animated movie. Now when I first saw the dwarves in the remake, I was like, what the actual f***? They look like the most uncanny valley effects I have ever seen. In the animated movie, they were wonderfully drawn and all looked goofy and charming and had tons of personality. Here, they look creepy and unpleasant. Now I will say, as bad as the dwarves looked, you do get used to their strange look after a while, and I thought that Doc was the only dwarf that looked the best and the least uncanny valley. But then we get to their goofy shenanigans, and the gags just don't land. My theatre was pretty full, and I didn't hear a single laugh, and there were a lot of kids in the screening as well, and even they were dead silent. And the dwarves act too dumb at times too. Now I know what you're thinking, the dwarves had dumb moments in the animated movie too, but that's when there were no stakes. When things got serious, they were dwarves on a mission. In the remake, however, when something serious is happening, they make comical suggestions and have little comedy bits. And the whole time I was watching, I was like, come on, the dwarves in the original would never act like this. But these ones do. And that's because they are very poorly trying to recapture what the dwarves did in the animated movie. Except the animated movie had characters, whereas the remake is just doing a poor imitation. And as for the 7 magical stoners, you don't get to know any of their characters. Most of them don't even talk. And the one who does talk the most is the dwarf. And because he was originally supposed to fill in for the 7 dwarves, I bet that's why they gave him more lines. Because they thought that would be enough to make us happy and forget about the original 7. And boy were they wrong. He also acts like he's been going too heavy on those shrooms. Every scene he looks and acts stoned off his ass.
I am the Rebel Quick, Master of the Crossbow. I am the Rebel Quick, Master of the Crossbow.
The dwarves in the original movie are lovable, memorable, and iconic characters. The movie has Snow White in the title, but the characters that everyone remembers the most is the 7 dwarves. And the animated movie did right by them in every way it could, even turning them into iconic characters, whereas the remake was ashamed of them, and then shrewdly threw them back in at the last minute. So the movie with superior dwarves is the one that thought they were important enough to include in the title, Snow White and the 7 Dwarves. Now I'm gonna make this quick because we all know who the winner is going to be, but I will say that Rachel Zegler, being a singer herself, actually did a really good job at singing these songs. She's got a very nice sounding voice, the songs have a good beat to them, specifically Whistle While You Work, which I actually enjoyed the most out of any of these live action remake songs, and I thought there was no auto-tuning to her voice. But according to Whole Lotta Video, who commented on my previous review for Snow White and has been an audio engineer for 40 years, he says that her voice is being auto-tuned. So, okay, I'll take his word for it. But to my ears, it wasn't anywhere near as heavy as Disney's previous remakes. My ears are still bleeding from Emma Watson's 100% computerized singing in Beauty and the Beast.
There must be more than this provincial life.
When we're a team, the house will gleam. So whistle while you work. Whistle while you work.
I will say though, that although some of the original songs that were created for this movie have a good rhythm to them, there are far too many of them and they don't match well with the original songs. And if they're sung by Gal Gadot, they are pretty much guaranteed to sound terrible.
Well, if somebody said that, somebody lied. It's the gold and the glitter and the gems.
She doesn't know how to deliver a note, she can't stretch her words, and she sounds bloody awful every time she does it. Even though the words themselves that are given to her, they do have a pretty decent rhythm to them. Now, if only they were performed by someone who could actually sing. The original songs are just classic Disney songs that they just don't make anymore. And we have all listened to them countless times, and to every generation, they have become iconic. And I definitely don't see the new ones taking off like the originals. So the movie with superior songs, unsurprisingly, is the original movie. So, it seems to have happened again. The Disney remake couldn't even win 1 point. And that's because Disney have fallen into all of the same trappings that they usually do. They make a simple story overcomplicated with a ton of additional nonsense that the heart and soul of the original animated film is nowhere to be found anymore. This movie was not only embroiled in controversy due to its 2 main actresses, but also because of Disney's inability to give a shit. One thing that has become abundantly clear with these remakes is that even though we see these Disney classics with such love and reverence, Disney do not. They say they do, but the studio heads in charge just see them as marketing opportunities. They don't care how these movies end up in terms of quality, and that has become increasingly clear from remake to remake. The original is the complete opposite. It does care. It did something new, it passionately constructed its characters, and it pushed boundaries and paved the way for animation to be as popular as it is today. The only boundary that the Snow White remake pushed is that it lost Disney so much money that they just might put an end to these live action remakes. It's time for the scores. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs gets a 9 out of 10, and Snow White gets a below average 4. The animated movie is of course the superior version. It's a wonderful family movie, and although it is dated in many ways, you just look past it and enjoy it for the wonderful movie that it is. And as bad as Snow White is, it's definitely not the worst Disney remake. There were a couple of decent things to come out of it, and I didn't find myself getting angry when watching it like I did with some of the other Disney remakes. But with that said, it still has no reason to exist. It's a pale imitation of the amazing original movie, and it deserves all the bad accolades that it's gotten. Disney have really lost themselves, and it's sad to see a studio that once prided itself on making such amazing movies now reduced to making disrespectful and uninspired cash grabs like this. If you like what I do, then feel free to support me over on Patreon and YouTube memberships. I upload content regularly on those platforms, and it's official. I'm going to open a Discord very soon, exclusive for patrons. And a huge thanks to Valerion for sponsoring this video. You can find links to their Vision Master Pro 2 in the description below. So, share your thoughts in the comments about the Snow White remake and how you think it compares to the new Lilo and Stitch. Also, let me know, what is your worst and least worst Disney remake? And be sure to give this video a thumbs up and click that subscribe button and the bell right next to it so you can stay up to date with all my future Versus videos. Thank you very much as always for watching everyone, and I will catch all of you very soon. Take care.